Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you are on YouTube and you're looking, you can actually see a little link down there. And you click on that, and you'll end up in Zoom. You click on that, and you'll end up in Mokana. And that's where you can ask questions. You can also vote on those questions, and you can be part of the conversation. If you think that you can answer those questions to get on this panel, you just need to get here early, 6:40 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. We do mic checks. If you're not here by the time we do the mic checks, then you're too late. You have to come another day. At 6 o'clock, we actually open. So you can come in and check your system, make sure that it's working, make sure everything's operational if you haven't done this before. So that gives you a little bit of time to work. Otherwise, we just kind of talk about whatever we talk about before 6:40, before those mic checks. Today is a busy day. We've got 7 a.m. to 8 a.m. We're going to have general discussion. 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. we're going to talk education. 9 a.m. to 10 a.m., we're going to talk about Zoom OSC, and 10 a.m. to 11 a.m., we're going to talk about Resolve. We're starting our Resolve training. So, the main thing for the Resolve is with each one of those, you have tags. You can tag those questions. If you don't tag it, we're assuming it's first hour. If you tag it, we have custom tags now for EDU, OSC, and BMD, which is for Resolve. Just make sure to properly tag your questions so we know what hour we're working with here. And try to keep most of your Resolve questions inside of what we were studying for this week. So I believe the cut page and some basic introductions. So try to keep it into those lanes so that we can stay focused on that conversation. But otherwise, we'll get going. Go ahead, Bill. Why don't you take it away?
Sure. Our first question comes from James Babbitt in San Diego, who says, in a regular Zoom meeting, do you need to set up breakout rooms after the meeting starts so that participants can choose which breakout room to join?
Yeah, if you want the participants to be able to choose, you have to do that. Go ahead, TJ.
Yeah, I was going to say I set that up every day in the post show and have to go in and manually type it every day.
It's a pain. It's for some reason when you do a pre-setup, you can set up where everybody goes when they come in. But when you want people to be able to wander around, you have to build them by hand every single time. I view that as a bug. I'm sure that there's a good reason for it somewhere, but it's a pain. Next question.
Comes from John Pruitt of Huntersville here on the panel and says, just ordered a MixPre 3.2 this morning. What do you need to be aware of? And are there any gotchas?
There's lots of gotchas. With great power comes great responsibility. Go ahead, Sky.
Scheduling your check-in time with Mickey so he can help you set it up. Just take a number now.
It is.
He'll serve you right after number 32.
There's so many people that have said, well, I was having trouble. And then I just spent a little time with Mickey and then I was fine. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I actually have a meeting late tomorrow at 8 a.m. with someone from Office Hours about their setup. But yeah, I think the first thing I would say is that the MixPre acts as a 6-in, 2-out interface to your computer. And you need to bear in mind as well with that Zoom takes in every single channel of the interface. So depending on what's routed to those 6 input USB streams, you could be summing some stuff together that you might not want to be sending out. Or you might be, clipping because you're sending multiple copies of the same source. So you might want to build something and loop back to be able to only take your microphone if that's the only thing you want to send out.
Good, TJ.
George Kennedy and Tucker both also helped me with my setup.
Very good, very good. Go ahead, Chris.
Does the MixPre have, let me rephrase that. On my Zoom H6, as I'm turning it on and putting it into interface mode, it asks me if I want to go into stereo input or multi-channel input. And maybe it's something that's unique to the Zoom H6, but it makes that whole thing of multiple inputs very easy, and also eliminated my need for having a separate mixer to bring my voice from left or right into the center. Does the MixPre have an option like that when you're turning it on or getting it into a mode, or does it do other devices just not have that?
Go ahead, Mickey.
I don't recall off the top of my head what it does, but I know there is a stereo mode in the USB settings. I don't recall though if it's 2-channel in or 2-channel out. I'll have to revisit the unit and test it out.
All right, next question.
TJ Asher of Minneapolis has a question for me about the band video. Did you cut on the beat, or did you use a technique where you cut a frame or two ahead of the beat? I wish there were rules that you can just say, if you do this, it'll come out better.
Do you wish that there were rules?
I do wish there were rules.
We wish, because usually I don't want any rules.
You've edited for a while, you find out that you try to just make it work the best you can. You should pay attention. Go back and read Walter Murch's In the Blink of an Eye, where he talks about when he's editing in a movie, he tries to just feel the cut 3 times. And when he gets it in the right place 3 times, that's the right place. There is some sense. And in this case, and I'm not going to elaborate on this, but it's a jazz piece that swings like heck. It's got a downbeat, but it's also got a 2 and 4 pulse rather than 1 and 3. And when I'm cutting it, here's one quick example. There's a scene where Greg on bass is full screen, and I'm popping in 4 windows below him to show that Victor is playing 4 different saxophones in 4 different parts. So in cutting that, at first I cut to Greg on what would be the downbeat, but then I went, no, I got to get him in early because I want the 4 windows to pop up and echo the beats. So I had to move up my initial cut to allow those 4 to draw your eye down so you're watching that. So there's 1,000 little things like that happen in the cutting, where you're just trying to feel your way through it and make sure that people are looking where you want them to look to see what they should see when they see it.
Next question.
Moving on to Kent King from Charlotte, North Carolina, I'm presuming. Hey, Alex, for the office hour band or any logo, what's your favorite specs for creating a multi-use? For example, lower 3 bug and so forth, logo for video, res, pixel count, file type, channels, naming convention for each channel, alpha, luma, so forth, or use one file at the highest res or specific for use. How close to crop the canvas?
So I have a couple ways that I deal with logos. The remotes is a great logo, and it's a little wider than I would normally do if I was designing one. I generally, almost every logo I do can fit into a square. So like comfortably into a square without taking up much space, because it fits on baseball hats better. So and it also fits into lower third bugs. It fits into so I think about where am I gonna, what am I gonna super it over? And generally inside of I want it to be square as much as I possibly can. Remotes is a hard one to make square. So so I think that it's a great logo. I mean, I think it's gorgeous. So I would say that the remotes is an exception, and I actually think it would probably look good on a baseball hat. But most of my logos are in squares. They are built as AI or EPS files, typically. And typically I start making those logos as black and white. I make sure that they work in black and white. And then I may add colors to those from there. And then a lot of times I might build 3D models of them and make them animate and so on and so forth. And you'll see some of that as we get closer to the Gear Media Tech logo, which is when you go to Discord, that's a very dark version of that, of that logo. So it's not so much, I mean, all the other things you can keep on generating, but the source file that you need needs to be an EPS or an AI file. And the reason is that you always need to start with a logo that is never, ever, ever, but like never, 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 ever build a raster logo. like that is like the cardinal rule of logos, is don't ever do that. I have clients that have done that, partners that have done that. They made some pretty picture that is their logo, and it's just a disaster. You look at Fortune, and you should look at Fortune 100 companies, because they have to print those logos on everything. And you'll notice that Apple started with a really creative one that had a tree and had a thing and had a whole thing, and now they have a simple little outline of an apple. And I would save you the trouble of getting there. All of us started that way. I used to design really, really complicated logos. But generally, if I can't figure out how it's going to be sewn onto a hat as a rule of thumb, or onto a patch, I don't make it. And so then you can keep on adding to it. But that, I think I know I didn't answer your question exactly the way you asked it, but I think that those are the pretty important pieces of that, Jeffrey.
2 things on the remotes logo. First of all, we wanted to have a little bit of layer, a little bit of hidden stuff in there. So like, for instance, the line going from the left and the right side are actually guitar chords. The other thing was that play button and I was a little adamant about that, making sure that play button was smack dab in the middle. It's not, but it's close enough to make it not feel somebody's OCDs knocking off. So those were the two things we wanted to have: the uniformity and the hidden ability in there, and of course all the name of Office Hours Remotes Band.
So and I will say Office Hours Remote Band breaks some of the rules that I was talking about, but I think it's a gorgeous logo. Like I was again, another surprise for me was that level of detail into it was an incredible song with an incredible edit and an incredible logo. The team really just crushed it. Go ahead, TJ.
Do you find when you're down, especially when you're down-resing a logo to make it small, that you need to kind of manipulate into more of a raster image to kind of get things to, because I deal with this a lot, and you take a logo and you make it small, it's like, well, it's just mush, and you have to really kind of tweak it a bit.
Where, I literally think about my logos in a way that how can I squeeze them down to a icon and still have them be readable is something that is generally the way I work, a square icon, because that shows up in a variety of things. And so I try to think through that process for most of the logos that I work on. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, for the companies that I'm part of, we usually hire a graphic designer to do our branding, and they always give us a brand book which has essentially rules of, say, like if the space is only this much, these are the rules of this is the part that you keep, this is the part you can take out, and also rules when, say, like if it's a colored logo and you have to print it on black over white or white over black, like there are specific like guidelines that we should follow to keep with our branding.
Yep, absolutely. I don't know if there's any someone needs. I'm sure it's out there somewhere, but I watch. We look at those all day. The first thing we do with the companies for the companies that I work with, we ask for the brand book, and they all have. All the companies we work with have one, and so we get this book, and then we go through it, and that's how we design. We pull everything together, and it makes it much simpler to figure out what to do next, because they generally thought of everything, all the different colors it could possibly, the combinations, what it can be next to, what it can't be next to, what you can take out, what you can't take out. And so it's good when you're building one, even for yourself, to think through that. It may not be the first thing you do when you build your logo. I haven't built one for our logo yet, but it is something that as you start to move forward, it's useful. Go ahead. Oh, I may use that as an example. I may build a brand book for the Gear Media Tech logo so that people we can use it as a template for people to see. At least it'll take a lot of the stuff from other brands to go from that. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, it even has other fonts you can use within the same document as as the logo, and also things like specific kerning and all these graphic designer stuff. I don't understand, but I just enter into Photoshop.
One of the smartest things I've seen a lot of brands do recently is build their own font. So they take a font and they send it to a font factory and say, we want it to look like this, start with Helvetica or Futura, but then make these adjustments and do all this stuff, or just run with it a little bit. And they build their own custom fonts. And the reason that that's really useful for them is it has their own subtle look. Like it's not that much different. Fonts are fonts, but it has their own, like when you see their stuff, you can feel it. The most important thing is it saves them a lot of money because they're not paying for all the licensing for all those fonts. And so they have a custom font that's really theirs, and they don't pay any licensing for it. They pay one time for the font factory to, font foundry to build the font for them, but they're not paying for it. If you're a large company distributing this all over, technically you have to keep buying those fonts, and it's a lot cheaper to have a font foundry build them for you. Next question.
Brian Carpenter of Medina, Ohio says Chad Lafarge's video image is just so stinking good. That's a technical term. Lighting, clarity, bokeh, blur. What is his video chain? Note, and with the eyeglasses tool, the ear gets crowded with glass, head-worn, and monitor. I agree with Alex that a USB consumer head-worn mic with built-in monitor would sell like hotcakes.
Go ahead, Chad.
Thanks, Brian. That's really kind of you. I am using a Sony a6100 with a Sigma 30 millimeter 1.4. The 1.4 is the important part. You need a really open aperture to get the bokeh that you're seeing back there. I'm running it through an Atem Mini. That's also going through a beam splitter, about 30R 70T glass for my Interatron. That will have minimal impact on the image, but some.
How big is your beam splitter?
15.
Yeah, it looks great. Yeah, it's a
Thank
great
you.
image. Yeah, absolutely. There you go. Any other? Every time someone highlights, I can't see everybody. All right, next question. Great work, Chad.
Guy Cochran of Seattle says, how would you play out a video into Zoom for a mission critical project?
Go ahead, George.
So I'm using MIDI right now, and it's just easy to just bump that out to MacBook Pro into the second input of the Atem Mini, and that's how I do all my playouts for here, and for larger projects I try to tie it back in the same way.
Have we tested much of the new video playout from that is available from Zoom? Have we tried that? I don't know how far we went with that. In fact, I can probably you can do it with the remotes. Hold on, let's see here. Let's try this. I have to admit that I just use I tend to use MediaLive for mine. It's tied straight in. If I'm working with someone who has an account that is a 1080p account, or if someone jumped, if it's a webinar. And so, or I get a Zoom room to join, one of my own Zoom rooms, or you can get Guy if you ask him nicely to jump in for a minute and pop the resolution. So in a meeting, you can get to 720 all the time that way with a Zoom room, or if you have a 1080p account, then you can play it out into that, and it works. I think it works pretty well if that account's there. But I haven't. What I keep on meaning to test is the playout. And while Barry is going to give his 2 cents, I'm going to see if I can't load one up, and we'll try it. Go ahead, Barry. Are you there, Barry?
You're muted.
Sorry. I use exactly the same setup as George because running Companion and MIDI, we're able to just play straight out into another input on the Atem Mini. Never, ever had it fail, and I've done literally hundreds of playouts using that method.
Yep. And go ahead, Chris.
I've tried it with my iPad Pro out of the HDMI dongle into the Atem Mini, and I've just be aware of your audio levels. For whatever reason, I had to really turn down the input gain to less than half when I'm playing back the audio that's coming with the video. So,
and on our larger system, we just have HyperDecks so that we can just going into the switcher and then we just cut to it. it just fires off. Especially when you've got a bunch of videos you're going to play, it's easier just to fire off that. But for smaller events, I just use MediaLive. And then Guy had a great solution yesterday to show the remotes. So Guy, can you explain that solution?
Sure. Yeah, I thought about it a little bit. I mean, they sent me the message at like, I don't know, late at night. And so I was just like, how would I do this? And in the past, I've used MIDI and I've used the iPad, and I was a little concerned about the internet going down because I'm working from home. And I was like, even if the power goes out, I got a UPS. But then I was like, let's just try playing it out from the cloud. So I went ahead and fired up an instance and pushed it through vMix. And to me, that just gave me a little bit extra confidence that even if the power went out, the internet went out, the show would go on.
You can still fire it from your phone.
Continue play. Well, yeah, and then the iPad was right here on cellular, so I could still play pause.
I'm going to try this video thing right now and just see what it looks like. And so I'm clicking on video here, and we'll just do a piece of it. It might kind of take over, so we'll see what happens here. Open. Whoa. Okay. Unsupported file format. So we might come back to that. It's because I opened up the high res one. It'll just take me a minute while we're talking. Maybe I'll come back as another question to convert it to probably H.264. Go ahead, Barry.
So on mission critical stuff, we always have 2 participants come in as VT playback, main and backup. And the host knows that the 2 VTs are being played in sync from 2 separate locations on 2 literally physical locations separately. And so he knows that if he can drop out on the first one, he can drop to the second one, and the audience will never know.
The edit in Zoom will be seamless if he drops to the second one. When we say the audience will never know, I'm just curious.
Well, they may see a name change, but they certainly will see enough continuity. Not frame for frame, but better than losing a picture.
No, absolutely. No, I just want to make sure we're specific about what we mean by that, because we do it where we have it playing back into one, but we do have 2 playbacks going, and we can cut between the 2. We can't fix the connectivity, which is what you're fixing there, which is good. But we, for us, a lot of times we have primary and backup playout going in, and we can do it, you'll see it because something happened. But anyway, yeah, go ahead, TJ.
For Barry, you said you had 2 separate places playing out the same video at the same time. How are you triggering that playback to start at the same exact instant?
So we'll use a back chat using WhatsApp, or if we have a very good presenter who says, let's go and take a look at the video now, then we just hit it at a sort of a professional point, and an audience generally wouldn't notice. Certainly we're getting hiccups in Zoom connectivity from time to time, and the audience would just generally realize or think that it might be their connectivity that's had a hiccup.
Right. I mean, one of the ways we've done it, not so much for primary and backup for multiple rooms, is that we send out the telnet codes to the hyperdecks in 2 different countries, and so they're within milliseconds of each other, when they fire off, because both of them are on a unified VPN. So it just knows what the 2 IPs are. So when it hits it, it just tells both of those IPs to go, and that's been another way. Let's try this. Let's see here. I'm going to share screen video. All right. Share. Now we're going to try. So you guys see a big black screen?
Yes, we do.
All right, let's see how this works. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. How did that look?
Looked and sound fine.
Yeah.
Came in at 1280 by 1280 by 720. So you must have had optimized for video, which is the way that you wanted in the test that we did in the Zoom test kitchen. If you tried 1920 by 1080, in other words, not clicking that box that says optimize for video,
okay,
it'll stutter. So you do want to click that, but it will drop it down to 1280 by 720, which will give it just a little bit more of a softer, rattier look, especially on some of the straight or diagonal lines. You'll see just stair stepping. So
right.
And
Jeffrey?
I'm seeing everybody with little glitches. Grant, you, it like did something to my feed.
Okay, well then there's our. I finally wanted to experiment with that, and now we have found it to be lacking. So now we know that we shouldn't use it. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
One thing we noticed yesterday was that the audio was a little bit loud. It needs to drop at least 3 to 6 dB. Otherwise, other people might hear it clipped.
Right. Cool. All right. Next question.
Moving on to Dan Huber of Erie, Pennsylvania. I want to experiment with what Alex showed this week, annotating on all sources. I ordered an Atem Mini, a Wacom 1, already have the Mac sources. What else should I get?
If you're getting that's all you need to do it. So it's just it's a computer that can do that you can draw over, and then you have that HDMI go out. The computer output goes into the Atem Mini. The Atem Mini's output goes into the its main HDMI goes into the Wacom tablet, and then you're just keying over it. So those are the only tools that you need to make it work. So yeah, go ahead, JJ.
The right cables.
Yeah, I mean HDMI cables. Yeah. Go ahead, George.
So Alex, do you need any special kind of software to make that happen, or just use what comes in the Wacom?
The Wacom doesn't have the software that'll work. You need a drawing package like Procreate or Photoshop. You can scale that up into full screen and get it working. Courtney has written one for the PC, so you can see him drawing on it right now. So you could do this with as much as a small little, and there's no CPU load, so you could do the smallest B-Link probably would work with this software there that Courtney's using. I am now kind of accelerated my my push to get the Mac version out. So anyway, mine takes a little bit longer to put it in the App Store and stuff like that, and I have to figure out how I'm going to support it, but I'm going to get it out in the next month or two, so maybe faster. And so then that one will be out there, and it's pretty basic as it goes out. There'll be kind of I'll put out a basic version and then a more advanced version and then a more advanced version. I have a lot of layers of things I'd like to put into a drawing program, but I just want to get one out there first. So we'll talk more about that when we get closer. Go ahead, Courtney.
Sorry, I had to get to my unmute. One question I was going to have, I thought about putting it in, and I didn't know on mine, if an eraser so that you could, you can clear the screen for everything. I thought about putting a little eraser that you could erase a section if you want to, but I don't know how useful that is.
You could. What I found operationally is that I don't use it very often. Mostly what I want to do is clear the screen. Like it's because I'm annotating. I'm not really drawing, detailed things. Again, the way I work on at least the work, and again, a lot of times tools are built based on the user that designed them, that if I'm going to do anything complicated, I'm going to animate it in Keynote and then I'm going to draw on top of it. So I don't try to build, real complicated things with it. I think eraser would probably be useful. That could be in my case, it would be draw with white. Like it's not or draw with background, but it's, again, one of the things that I worry about a lot is keeping it super simple. What I found with all the apps and the reason I built my own was that the challenge really is for speakers is to be present. So the more options you provide, the less present the presenter is. The presenter only job is to be present in a lot of ways. And so you have to be, a lot of it's moving the dials and stuff away and limiting what they can do, specifically because even if they can do it, then they start thinking about those things. And literally your computer in your head can only do one thing at a time. And so it's doing this back and forth thing that you can see at the beginning. Like a good example is at the beginning of the show, which I'm about to fix because it drives me crazy, is that while I'm talking to you at the beginning of all of these shows, now that I figured out how, I used to have this long pause that I don't have anymore on YouTube. I tried to fix that, but now what happens is while I'm talking, YouTube pops up. 50% of the time, YouTube pops up with the audio on. So I suddenly hear myself in the ear while I'm talking. You'll see me pause there for a second, and then I have to mute it but I don't know if that's going to happen because YouTube does it sometimes and sometimes it doesn't. So it's like this random, thing that YouTube does. And so then I'm kind of fiddling through all of those things to make it work. Now, when we move to the link, which I got all set up and I can see it in AWS, and it's all like this slow little process of grabbing it all together, then somebody else will manage it. like I don't have to do it anymore. Like it'll just go, okay, we're live, and then I start going. Go ahead, Jen.
Question for you on that regard. Does a browser window open for you for the YouTube?
Well, yeah. So when you hit live on Zoom, it opens a browser window. Then you fill out the stuff you want, and then you hit go. And so it doesn't do a new browser window, but it changes state in the middle of my talk. So it changes state. It pops to YouTube as soon as it's done creating the YouTube event, but it's streaming to YouTube before that. So there's this long gap that you're looking at. Go ahead, Jen.
Well, what I found is I'm using Restream right now for that, and it does open a browser, but I don't need to keep the browser open. So as soon as I go down and click live stream to YouTube, I just shut the browser window immediately. And then I have another monitor to the side to make sure that it's feeding.
Right. And the main thing is that I'm going to AWS because instead of Restream, because Restream is just a skin for AWS essentially. And so I'm just taking them out of the middle of the package. And what it's going to allow me to do is essentially build lots of outputs, and eventually I could build my own CDN. So I could basically have complete control over it and not even use one of the public CDNs to do it using CloudFront. So that's kind of the direction that I'd rather get into something that is a little harder for me to get up to speed, but then scales as far as I want it to go, because it saves me time. Next question.
Greg Gibson in Washington, D.C. is in next with, I think I've heard you guys talking about some kind of bug in Zoom where co-host changing view can affect the audience view in a webinar, even if the host has spotlighted a view. Can you explain specifically what the behavior is? I think I encountered this issue in a program this past week.
Go ahead, Mickey.
So yeah, we figured out that Zoom not only follows what the host does, it also follows what co-hosts do. So If say right now Jeffrey is a co-host, and if he switches to the active speaker view, that is what's going to be sent out to the audience, and not the gallery view, which I'm on at the moment. And yeah, it follows whichever the last command it sees is.
Go ahead, TJ.
Yep, same thing Mickey was saying.
There you go. Next question.
JJ McKenna, Santa Venetia, California. What is a good platform agnostic software for creating 3D models using photographs?
If only we had someone that knew something about that. Oh, Nick. What are you using these
for
days?
the first time in a long time, I have to find my unmute button. One of the go-tos is Agisoft Metashape. That's fully cross-platform, Windows, OS X, and Linux. So that's the one I use. I don't know if there are others.
Yeah, there's Reality. What's the
Reality Capture?
Reality Capture.
Is that
It's
cross-platform?
I think so. Yeah.
All right.
Yep. And so I am going to be diving more into Reality Capture. So like Nick, I've been using Photosynth before that, and now and before Metashape, and so I've been using it for a long time. So it's like it's a very well-worn handle, and I know how to use it, and so I use Metashape a lot for what I'm doing. I don't really like the pricing model nearly as much as Reality Capture. Reality Capture, you only pay for what you output, so you can use it as much as you want until you work on it. Now you can also, the thing to know about Metashape is you can download it and you just can't save. The nice thing about Reality Capture is you can save, you can't save until you pay for it. Like you can't save your demo files, I don't believe, until you can, so you have to leave them open for a long time. And what I do on machines that I don't have it licensed is I can play with ideas, but I have a copy of Metashape, but I kind of begrudgingly, if I go 2 or 3 months without using it, which has happened occasionally, I'm like, wow, I just paid a lot of money to not use it. So with Reality Capture, you can save things, you can work with them, and then they can't go anywhere until you pay for it, and you only pay for that output. So I think that I would look at both of those. They're both relatively even as far as feature set and quality. So they have different advantages, and we can probably bring. What we ought to do is if someone reminds me and puts a second hour in that they want to talk about photogrammetry again, what we ought to do is get guys like Brent Schnarr and Fred Freikert in here, and we'll talk more about it in detail. And generally, Capture and Reality, I think, would be a good second hour of just talking about LiDAR and photogrammetry and how they fit together, because a lot of times you're using both of them. And I think that that's going to be more interesting, as the iOS apps mature. I think we're going to have a better time with that, because right now on the phone you have LiDAR, but the LiDAR is not very detailed. It's a very low resolution LiDAR, and then you have this great camera, but it's unstructured light. So LiDAR is structured light. It means we know exactly where those points are. Your pictures are unstructured light. We have just a bunch of colors. We don't know where they were. And so being able to mix, what we haven't seen anybody do effectively on the phone yet is to really effectively mix structured and unstructured light together. So basically what the possibility is very, very accurately identifying where the photos came from and where certain key points on the surfaces are, and then letting the detail be added by the photos. And I haven't seen anybody do that from the phone yet. I mean, you can definitely do it with other tools, but I haven't seen the phone do that. It only gets color of vertices or color of polygons is all you're getting right now from the phone. So it'll give you a colored image, but it's not using that photographic information to build 3D structures. Go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, I was just going to mention that you can do it as a post-production process. So if you could,
absolutely,
you could use the camera to capture all the photos you like. You could use the LiDAR to capture a millimeter accurate structure.
Yep.
And then in something like Blender or Maya Cinema 4D, you can basically blend those approaches, project the high quality images onto accurate geometry.
And also with Metashape and with Reality Capture, you can actually blend the data so that you can build the photogrammetry data and the LiDAR data, and have the photogrammetry data adding detail to the LiDAR data, and so on and so forth. The LiDAR data tightens the solution, and it also scales the solution. Photogrammetry starts to fall apart at certain when you don't have a lot of overlapping images, trying to patch them all together becomes kind of a thing. Like we did, Fred and I did, it was about 2 square miles of LiDAR. But that was building, 2 square miles of LiDAR is, what we had to do there was we locked the GPS to the, to known points in Pennsylvania. so there's known points in GPS. Like I know where I am from these 2 distances, and those 2 distances are well known. And so then it locked the golf course that we were scanning to that position. We then locked via radio and GPS. We then built a geodetic network across the entire golf course. And then what that allowed for is every time we created a new triangular solution of that data, it tightened that solution, because if I keep on seeing these points overlapping, the points of where we're shooting the LiDAR tighten, because they're now related to other known points. And so as we started to do that, then we were able to tighten a really, really strong base of that. We then used photogrammetry from a drone to fill in spots that were essentially geometric shadows across the, because from the LiDAR, we couldn't, go over a hill. It's a golf course. Go over a hill and there's it literally looks like shadows, but there's just no geometry because it didn't see it. And so mixing and matching those, you end up with a pretty high-res geometry across a very large space. But that's not something you can get photogrammetry to do that, but it will never be as accurate as the LiDAR. So you want to mix and match, and as it relates to the individual of being able to pick up your phone and turn something into a 3D model, you need both of those. Like the LiDAR will never be enough, and the photogrammetry will never be fast enough, in my opinion. And so what we haven't seen is any developers do both of those together with the phone or the iPad. And when they do, and when they're generating USDZ outputs, and when Pages and Keynote and other things support USDZ, what it means is you'll be able to take basically 3D photos and throw them into your presentations, into your Pages document, into Motion. Like all those things are going to be, you'll turning things in the real world and throwing them into your virtual world will be nothing. And we're not that far away from that. It's just a matter of developers understanding or pulling those 2 pieces together. And I've seen hints of it. We just haven't seen it. I'm downloading like every app that comes out on the phone, excited that someone will crack this soon. It just hasn't been cracked quite yet. Go ahead, Barry.
So you bring up an interesting point about cost of software. With the licensing, we have to pay for everything we use. And work has become so diverse that 1 month I might use a piece of software and not use it for another 11. It strikes me there's an opportunity there for someone to come up with some sort of sharing website where we deposit our licenses there when we're not using them, so someone else can use them. And I'm sure there's an opportunity there for someone.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just against all the terms of services. Like that.
Yeah, but apart from that.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, if it scales, if you're successful, it'll be shut down really quickly. What the early roots of subscription services was actually in the Pixel Core when I created it. Basically, within the membership the Pixel Core members had, they had access to a very thousands and thousands of dollars. I think at one point up to $20,000 worth of software. They only had educational licenses to it. They didn't have the commercial licenses for it, but they had access to all the software. And if you talk to people back then, they were like, "Oh yeah, you had to subscribe to Pixel Core because you got access to all the software." And then the main thing was the argument we made was that nobody's going to use it. Nobody that could afford the software will use it in a commercial entity, because in the United States the fines are so high that one angry employee is the end of your business. And so it didn't, you could handle it in a different way. Now go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, the first thing to set up on one of those license sharing sites would be a copyright attorney sharing. So you share your copyright attorney.
Yeah, go ahead, Barry.
So thinking about the licensing that QLab do, many people have said to me, what are you using for playback? And if I say to them, well, you need that program, they say, oh, but I don't have it. I don't want to license it for a year, but of course they'll do it for a couple of days, which is really great for people.
I think, and that's again, what Reality Capture does is they only charge you for the outputs. So you can work with it all the time. You can set up workflows. You can build all those things out there, and then you just only pay when you push something out the door. And so that's a pretty pretty slick business model. That's why I'm looking at switching from Metashape specifically, because I'm just tired of paying for the subscription. I just want to pay when I use. For the company, it's harder because subscriptions are a really solid business plan. You have money coming in every day. It doesn't really change very dramatically each month unless you really screw something up. So it's easy for you to project. When you have people just using it when they're, the use cases, the problem the company has is knowing how much money they're going to make next month, making payroll. Sorry, as anybody who's owned a company is like, all you worry about is making payroll. Next question.
James Babbitt of San Diego is up next. Excuse me. With as an alternative to a green screen, what size TV display would you use as a background for a Zoom meeting? Is there a specific display that you'd choose?
We've done it with 70-inch. It's pretty nip and tuck at 70-inch that you really have to be technical at that level. But once you get to 75 or 80-inch, it's pretty easy. We've done a lot of 70-inch ones, though. We had I think 8 of them that had stands and everything else that we use for this kind of thing all the time. At 70-inch, the person has to be about there's this math that goes on, is that you need to be about 3 feet from the thing, but then you have to pull the camera back 10 feet because the focal length of the camera, as you zoom in, you're flattening that background to them. You're pulling that more into the center. And so the larger your screen, the closer the camera can be and the further away the person can be from the screen. So so it gives you more freedom. And nowadays 75-inch TVs are relatively inexpensive. So, and 80-inch TVs aren't that expensive for a background. And so it does make a difference. You'll think that 1080p is okay, but it will moire faster than 4K. So a 4K image will, a 4K TV, if I was going to put one in a facility, I know this will sound absurd, but if I was going to put one in a insert stage, I would put an 8K back there because it'll be nice and smooth all the time. You end up with moire. Moire issues is really what you're working on there. So anyway, those are the things to think about. But 75 is where I would consider. 70 is the bare minimum. 75 is the close, and it just gives you a lot more freedom. 80 inches is going to give you a lot of freedom to kind of move the camera around, not be too far away. You will still have certain focal lengths that will moire. It's just the nature of that problem, but generally you can make it work. And I will say that they are so much easier to deal with than green screen. I built a green screen insert stage that we used all the time and found it easier because you have to worry about what people are wearing and how they're doing it and everything else. You do have to remember to tilt your screen down just a little bit. Usually 10 degrees is enough, and it'll get all the lights out of the screen. Go ahead, Mickey, and then Andrew.
How crucial is it to actually have 4K content on the 4K panel?
Not at all. It's the pitch of the LCD or LED that's back there that's the problem, not the content itself. Because usually the smart thing to do is to blur the background. So you can actually start with a 640 by 360 image and then scale it up and blur it. Because then that's going to create basically a forced short depth of field. And so what you end up with, which is really kind of cool, is you can close down the aperture a little bit so that you have more room for your subject to move back and forth. So you can be at a 5.6, aperture, but it'll look like a 1.2, because you blurred that background. Now it can look unnatural if you go too far with that, but you can play with this where the person has more depth of field. If you go too far, again, it looks unnatural. But if you go a little bit, you end up with this situation where the background, it just looks softer, but the person has a little bit more room to move back and forth. And so there's a little bit of that. Now, the same rules apply for the green screen as it does with the screen, which is that to really make it work, you need to go out and take the background images with a camera that is at the same focal length, same aperture, same position as what you're shooting in the insert stage. And so when you do that, when all the vanishing points are correct and everything there, it is indistinguishable. No one on the other side, if you don't see reflections, is going to see the difference. They're not going to know that it's any other way. Usually what tags people to that there's an issue is that the focal length, they won't know physically. They can't tell you what it is. They just know it's fake because their lower brain can't figure out why it's doing a certain thing. So what we've done also is shoot videos that way. So not just stills, we'll take it out. Like we've done ones where we take a camera in a corporate environment to where all the desks are, where people are walking. We focus it to the 10 feet and leave everything go out of focus. And then people are just walking around doing their thing, and then it looks like you're dropping an executive right into where the people are, and they're just in, and they're just talking out of their office. It's great. Go ahead, Courtney.
The other thing to worry about is color temperature, because you have to color balance it to.
Yeah.
If you're lighting with tungsten light, you're going to have to change your color display radically. And the problem is when you shift toward tungsten on LCD displays, it kind of narrows the sweet spot. So you got to be careful about that.
We shoot 56 in front of them because it's a lot easier to deal
right,
with.
That way you
the
don't
TV.
have to. Because most television
56.
sets have 63 to 9300 Kelvin backlights. So
we do 56K, whatever we're doing that. And then the other thing is that we usually do it in Photoshop. So we display it out of Photoshop or whatever, and we don't try to correct the TV. We just correct the image to the TV to the thing, rather than dealing with the consumer TV is way harder than just color correcting the image in Photoshop. Go ahead, Andrew.
Let's say you don't have an 8K or even a 4K screen, and you want to mitigate the moire. Short of smearing the screen with Vaseline, is there something that you can put on top, like maybe some sort of Mylar or something?
Yeah, so you can do rear projection. Rear projection screen will work.
No, but putting it on top of a LCD panel.
Rear projection screen over top of the LCD.
Oh, it's a product.
Yeah,
Okay.
You can buy it in rolls. So you can do it. Now you're going to lose a couple stops, like 3 or 4 stops. When you do that. But when you push it up against it, it will get rid of the moire at that point. It has a different sheen to it, so you have to kind of play with it. But you can use it comes in these big rolls of rear projection screen that you can buy. I don't know where. I can't. We bought it. We accidentally bought like way too much. Anyway, so
thinner or less. There's nothing less or more transparent than that.
I haven't found anything. We didn't really have any problem. Even we had a 80-inch 1080p screen in our insert studio, which we were able to make work. We just knew that at very specific zoom angles, we had trouble. That was it. I mean, and the other thing to know is that one other ninja trick, if you're building this, is you want the desk in front of the person, their chair, and the background screen to be all on motors. That you can control, because there's this interaction between the desk, the person, and the monitor. And if you don't have to move the camera and you just move those around and get them all interact, you can get them all just right without any trouble. Anyway, let's move on to the next question. I said I was going to finish by 7:30, and then I started in my head. I had it at 8. So let's buzz through these questions.
Okay, Jason Panks of Nashville, Tennessee, is up next with sharing PowerPoint on Zoom, but not have it take over the whole screen. Share screen or use virtual cam input and dual spotlight. Sorry, Alex, I meant Keynote instead of PowerPoint. The
problem is any kind of, on most of my stuff that I'm doing a real presentation, like I'm doing it all the time, and where I'm moving here is always to use a video input. If you have a high enough resolution, the advantage of doing it with share screen is you'll get all the resolution. If you don't have a 1080p or 720p webinar, you'll always get clear images. Otherwise, it's really small. So that's the reason you use it. But otherwise, it's better to be cutting it into your switcher or something like that than to because you can switch back and forth and it's not constantly changing state. It's a annoying bug of Zoom or a limit of the features. Next question.
Frederick Eckert of Bad Herrenalb, Germany says, AWS MediaLive, does AWS offer a built-in solution to link the stream to a web page, or do you need to link the stream over another CDN to the web page?
You can absolutely build it all the way from glass to glass with AWS. So you would put it into a link, goes into MediaLive, Media Connect, comes out CloudFront. You can stack it all the way up. You may need a player. I don't know if they build a player, but as far as the CDN goes, AWS can go all the way there. I think the only thing it might be missing is a player, which you might use a JS player. Next question.
James Babbitt of San Diego, in a comment during the post show on Friday, what does it mean that on Zoom the bit depth is crushed and the reverb is less audible?
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, we were speaking yesterday in the post show, and what a lot of people assume is that they heard that the dynamic range that was of the music that's being played out, which is affected by the bit depth, was less than what was expected. And also for some reason, yeah, the reverb that Pete added into some of the instruments wasn't coming through nearly as clearly as the raw audio files.
Next question.
Gregory Wheeler of Ellicott City says, what podcast software solutions does Office Hours recommend?
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
There's a lot of different factors that you'd have to factor in, whether you're doing a solo podcast, whether you're doing a one-on-one podcast, whether you're doing a with the phone podcast, whether you're on PC and whether you're on Mac. I'll tell you something really quick. When I started podcasting, everybody was going for Audacity, which I hated because it was a burn-in. Once you record it, once you change it, it's there. You can't change anything. I went to Acid, which was Sony's. Now it's by a company called Magic. It's relatively low priced, and it works really well on that. And you can also bring in multiple stems. So if you have 2 or 3 people, you can do it that way. On the Mac side, don't go towards GarageBand. They used to do podcasts, and then they took that part out of GarageBand. Now it's back. It's just too confusing at that point.
Right. On the Mac side, I use Logic because I want to build a skill set, so I want to be using it all the time. So if I'm doing something heavier, again, what I tend to do is want to use everything that I'm doing to figure out how to do something heavier. And so when you get into a smaller app that is much lighter, like Audacity or Reaper or other things like that, you're going to end up with a great skill set in a limited pipeline. And so I always want to go through the pain of learning something and just get something that I'm going to end up using for a long time. Next question.
Paul Pruskowski, Gainesville, Florida. Is there a way to send a feed to an Atem Streaming Bridge other than from an Atem Mini? I tried direct from vMix and had no luck using the same address and key from the XML config file.
Nope. There's no way to do it. No, we've never seen it in the wild. So unless you have an answer that is, I actually did it, go ahead, Jeffrey. It better be an answer that you actually had it work.
I just want to say
I just want to say
I was really hoping. Yeah, no, really quick. I was really hoping that they would have come out with a camera which had that ability. Yeah. But yes.
Yeah. I'm sorry. When we're out of time in speed round, it's just the answers. All right. Next question.
Kent King, Charlotte. Shorter follow up. How do you get clean logos in text and video?
The biggest thing that people have trouble with is pre-multiplying the alpha channel. So getting an alpha channel out that's going to be pre-multiplied. If you try to chroma key it, it'll never work because you're dealing with a subsampled image. You can luma key those sometimes, but the luma key controls will tend to eat into the edges. So a solid, for Atem, for instance, exporting out as a TGA works. Pings can sometimes work. It's saving out pings, but the easiest way is a TGA file out of Affinity of all things, or Photoshop are the 2 ways to get that done. Next question.
John M. Gerard, Berkeley, California. Is there a Mac software meter app to adjust my mic to? Something not expensive. I know there is a Zoom built-in meter that does this, but not show the numbers.
What is the free one? I think Jeff Francis is talking. There's Uline, right? Uline. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, Uline, and also Isotopes Insight, which is a fantastic set of metering tools, was on sale a couple of days ago. I'm not sure if it's on sale again. It's still until now, but it was on. I am checking my emails because I bought another. Right, so I got it from Plugin Boutique. It was for sale for $49 US when typically it's $200.
Oh man. Okay. Yep.
So go get them.
Or Uline. That's cheap. Next question.
Charles Hodge, White Lake, Michigan. On the WLM meter, what's the difference between blue numbers and white numbers?
When it's blue, it's too quiet or too cold. When it's white, you're right in the ballpark.
Next question.
Jan Landy, Las Vegas. Does anyone have any ideas on how to get LinkedIn to open a live stream account? I've applied at least 20 times and have never once gotten a reply.
You have to have, I think it's, there's a bunch of restrictions to it, and I can't remember what they all are, but they're opening it very, very slowly. But I think it's a minimum of 2,000 followers, I believe it is the number. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
If you are in Restream or StreamYard, they have some pull. Send them a message, and they might get you on LinkedIn.
Yeah, but it's tricky. Next question.
John Pruitt of Huntersville in the panel here. What are the new features of the Blackmagic Design 6K Pro?
Super fast, TJ.
Bigger battery, flippable screen, built-in NDI filters.
Dang it.
was built-in NDI filters, built-in ND filters. So yeah, electronic ND. New audio. There's a viewfinder that you can put on top. There's a battery that can go underneath. There's a new battery that is the Sony batteries instead of the Canon batteries. But the biggest thing is this screen. In the pictures, it doesn't do it justice that it actually will articulate all the way like that, which is pretty dang cool.
That's great.
So that's that.
Gonna have to buy it. All right, next question.
Dan Maliska of Nelson, British Columbia. Can I get away with the 2018 3.6 gigahertz quad-core i3 Mac Mini with 8 gigabytes of memory for the office hours Resolve training?
You can kick around on that, but you're not going to be able to. I wouldn't put anything in it over 1080p and know that there will be things that'll just drag it down. I mean, i3 is really light for Resolve. I don't know if it'll run. It will play back at that with that processor. So it may not be quite enough. Next question.
Philip Oler of Katona, New York. Past 2 months have been using base model M1 Mac Mini and running Adobe Premiere successfully. Just this week, getting out of memory errors and a huge swap files of up to 40 gigabytes. Anyone else experience the same or have solutions? Don't think the app updated, but OS did.
I don't know. I don't know. I think we have a lot of Premiere and a lot of Resolve and Final Cut users here. I don't know how many, if anyone Premiere is using the M1 yet. Next question.
JJ McKenna, Santa Venetia. What's the lowest latency network program for doing video comms, not cloud-based, obviously?
I'm assuming video connections. Lowest latency is the switch. It's capable of 30, 40 milliseconds, over fiber, but it's expensive. Think a couple $1,000s on each end. So if you're looking for lowest latency network, the switch is probably going to be the lowest latency. Go ahead, JJ.
Actually, to amplify, what software would one use? So if we were on a closed campus, what would one use to communicate with someone in another room?
Via video. That's what you're looking for, though.
Yeah, video.
I mean, I don't know if it gets much faster once you go over IP networks. It doesn't. I mean, I'm trying to think of anything that's dedicated that's going intranet.
Video Dante.
Yeah. NDI. I mean, you could do NDI each way. I mean, that might actually be the lowest latency. You might get that down to pretty quick. I mean, I think that over an IP network, if you don't have, if you have fiber, you could have a fiber connection between the two and be converting the cameras back and forth to fiber, and it'll be super low latency. I mean, 10 milliseconds. But NDI is otherwise probably the fastest way over an IP network to get from one place to the other. They just have to both be, I think, in the same subnet. Do they have to be in the same subnet? Anyway, that's an interesting question. All right. So someone else is raising their hand. We're going to go on to the next question.
And it's the last one in the regular set before we get to our this is great. Great use of tags, everybody. Anyway, TJ Asher in Minneapolis says this guy doing some subliminal marketing by having that box for the new Blackmagic Pocket Cinema 6 on the shelf behind
brought to you
him.
by, but it's not brought to you, by the way. It's not, we don't get anything from Blackmagic. No. That's great. It looks so pretty.
Spotlight.
And by the way, the nice thing is in the operator page, a lot of the tags, if you look at the ones that have the letters next to them, it means I went through and tagged them while people were talking. But we do a quick reminder to everyone that we have a lot of things going on right now. So if you think about your questions for Zoom OSC, make sure to tag them as Zoom OSC. Obviously, BMD is starting up today. So there's a lot of BMD questions. And then so you can tag them yourself. So you have to ask the question. You don't have to type in edu or whatever. Ask the question and then tag it as a certain hour. So this is our new refinement as we get more and more things going on. All right, why don't we go ahead and check our educators really quickly. So if you're an educator, go ahead and come in here. We'll add you. I think a lot of them have already jumped in, but we'll do a real quick mic check. Got a couple. Mickey, why don't you head? Yeah. Okay. Yep.
Alrighty. Hey, folks. Same as usual. Please put your first name, last name, and location in Zoom. And on the meters, the goal is hit negative to 24 LUFS on the short term. Let's start off with Tony and then move on to Steve Cotton afterwards.
Hello, office hours, education division. How's everybody doing today? I am coming in on a PAL mic into an M1 Mac Mini, and I'm using my Atem Mini.
Hey Tony, yeah, so if you could go down 3 dB, which is just one button click on the Atem's level control. It should be about
That
there.
is one button down. It's a cloudy day here, but the weather is warming up.
Yeah, I think you're about there, Tony. Thank you. Steve, yeah, if you're joining us, Steve, please turn on your cam.
Sorry
Yeah,
about
Steve
that.
and then Aaron afterwards.
Hello, everybody. It's a lovely day here in the East Bay and San Francisco Bay Area, and I'll be talking about that level. It looks like I'm a little hot.
Yeah, a little too low actually. So if you could
Ow,
give us a 2 or 3 dB up.
There you go. How about that? I'll be talking about that level. I shouldn't exceed that much. I'll be talking about that. Okay?
Yes, sir.
Great.
I think you're about there. Thank you. Aaron and then Emily Rousseau afterwards.
Good morning from Boston, where it's currently snowing, but then it'll be 50 degrees sometime this week. So who'd have thunk? Boston weather for you.
That's a good check. Thank you. Emily and then Chris Clark.
Good morning from Red Hook, New York, where it was also snowing and now it's raining. And I'm going from an AKG 414 Symmetrics to a Scarlett Solo.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Chris. And then Jesse Mills.
Good morning from Tempe, Arizona. Happy to see your smiling faces and feeling good about life in near the middle of the pandemic.
That's a good check. Thank you. Jesse and then Trevor afterwards.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Jesse from the Bay Area here. Just checking my levels, trying to get that magic number, and looks like I'm about there. Thanks.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. Trevor and then Michael Ball.
Morning. It is great to be back, and I actually am on a mix pre now, so hopefully I have more control. Looks like I'm pretty quiet. Hopefully, oh man, blew it over. Definitely very happy to be back. I have to say that I don't love Apple anymore for the 2 weeks that I loved it. This is very sensitive. All right. Maybe I don't like the mix pre because it seems like if I even touch the knob, it moves by 6 dB.
Yeah.
How are we doing there?
Be very subtle with your changes there, and get a reading after each adjustment. Don't keep on moving it. But yeah, maybe just a tiniest nudge back up, like half a dB, Trevor. Right. Let's move on to Michael and then Paul or Kara if you're joining us.
All right. Good morning, office hours. I'm glad to be back. I'm joining from a 4266 into the mix pre. The knobs are fiddly, but everything else about it is an amazing piece of hardware.
Just one more dB up, I think.
One more
and
dB
Paul has mentioned
Thank
that they're not joining, so they're going back to attendee. Tyler, are you joining us today? I guess not. So we'll send the Tyler back to attendee as well. All right, that is the education panel so far.
Excellent. If those two, if those, you guys have been on before, so if you figure out whatever's going on in your video, just let us know. So usually we'll kick it off of what's new. What's new for all of you? Is there anything new over the last week before we jump into the questions and comments? No, it's more of the same. Yeah. It's interesting, I guess in our county, I guess the kids are now going, 2 hours at a time, I guess, to the to school, which they vastly prefer over the old version. I think the 2 hours a day is actually, the kids like it better than Zoom, and also like it better than the old school. So, only showing up for 2 hours a day has the reports back from my kids are, this is the best version so far. Go ahead, Chris.
I had an insight this morning that I'd be happy to have people shoot down, but I had the sense that almost a year into the pandemic and various degrees of lockdown, that the herd that was scattered is now beginning to reassemble. And one of its destinations is the waterhole called school. And there's certainly outliers and people who are still staying isolated, but humans are herding animals. And it's starting to feel like the herd is reassembling and headed toward face-to-face schooling.
Yeah. I mean, I think that everyone wants to go back to where they were. So I think that I think that's, I think that that's going to be as you've heard before, I still feel like that could be a weak point for education in the future, because there's just a lot of opportunity now that the tools are a lot better and things are moving a lot faster. And if public schools all go back to physical, they kind of, from a tactical perspective, I think put themselves at a disadvantage over what's, private competition. Talak.
I mean, I think that's all true. We just need to be also mindful that things are still in a bit of turmoil. I had a student who lost a family member to COVID this week, and then her husband lost his job. So things are still difficult in ways that we are not used to, even though it's a year.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's jump into the questions.
Our first one comes from Emily Russo, our friend here in the panel from Red Hook. High school wants to do a cabaret show. They want to stream it to YouTube for the whole community to watch. What are the copyright issues, particularly? How do they protect themselves and not get their stream shut down? They have a Zoom meeting, but not a webinar. So that is why it'll be on YouTube.
So there's a couple things to do there. The number one is to play the songs, open up an account, and I would use a dummy account, not your real account, and create an unlisted event and play all the songs through that unlisted event. And what you're going to see is what the behavior is of the copyright holders. So in YouTube, copyright holders have, I think, 3 options in their CMS. So when you're a copyright holder, you have 3 ways of handling things. You can track, if someone's using your content, you can track them, which means nothing. Like they literally just have a dashboard, and it'll show them everywhere that content showed up. You can demonetize them, which means that and that's what the most common thing for artists to do is just make sure that you can't make money at it. So that you'll see a flag that says you've have a copyright flag or something like that. And basically no advertisers will run on it. You won't get any money out of it. And so that is by far, well, I mean, actually tracking is probably by far the most common for a lot of artists, because they just want to see where it is. And then demonetizing is the second most, and then the third one is to strike it, and so if you're playing like the Eagles, you'll get a strike. And so that's why you don't want to do it on your own account, is because you can strikes. I believe I haven't had a strike for a long time, but the strikes are generally 6 months for each strike. And once you get to 3 strikes, you're in restricted status, which means you can't stream, you can't upload, you can't, so you want, strikes are something you want to be careful of. You get a little bit of room. But if you play out all those songs, what you'll see on the back end is what the behavior of whoever the copyright holder is, what they're going to do with those songs. Because if all you're going to do is get flagged and demonetized, rock on. So we do it all the time. I'll do shows that have like 8 or 9 strikes, but I knew that they were coming, not strikes, but 8 or 9, tags that have demonetized my, and stacking up those doesn't mean anything more. And so, so that's one way to handle that. The other way to handle it is to do, if you don't have a lot of viewers, you can go into a private, you could do a private stream, so, well, not private on YouTube will not be seen by the machine, but it's very cumbersome. You can't have parents going into a private stream. It'll be too hard to manage. But what you can do is build, I don't believe that Vimeo's live stream, I don't believe that it has a copyright. And if you're doing your own stream within that, I don't think it looks at that, but you might want to test it. And then, the geeky version of this is to, actually have someone set up a CDN and a player, and then you definitely won't have any issues. So, because it's not going through anybody else's, and those are easier to set up than you would think. And you should, if it's far enough out, you should contact me because I'm doing R&D in that area right now. Sky and then Roscoe.
Reach out to Lawrence on the panel. He did an amazing experience, and it sounds very similar to what you're asking for.
Yep. Go ahead, Roscoe.
Test early, test often, and make sure that the final link is not direct to YouTube. Make the parents go to a web page that evening to find the link to click on to go to the actual event. That way, when you run into issues, you can swap out to a new link at the last minute.
Go ahead, Michael, and then Talak.
Yeah, I mean, similar to what Alex said, I would also consider what login systems you have that parents can currently use, and you could even chat in Discord, but there's probably a good chance that either there's a place that you could embed a private stream within your school LMS tools, or depending on what the district has, someone else might even have access to a more dedicated video platform already too.
Good. Tlaloc?
I was also curious to know if you're needing to get any rights to do the show, if it's a review of songs, if you're needing to get any rights anyway to do that. If you want, you could go to a platform like Showtix for You and actually put a paywall. Not a paywall. I mean, the show can still be free, but there's a registration barrier, and then you don't have to worry about it at all, especially if you have the rights for what you're doing.
And generally, most schools, especially in this environment, have been running pretty wild and not having any issues at all, because no one's suing a school over a school play would be disastrous right now. So I don't think in the reality, I don't think you have too much risk to go. Go ahead, Guy.
I was going to also say, Grant had this nice bit of information to use, like Rebrandly or Bitly as the URL that you pass out to the parents and kind of advertise with. That way, if something does happen, you have a way last minute to change that. If you know for sure you're going to be throwing something out there that you shouldn't be, then I just probably wouldn't. But if it is clean, I do have a Livestream Enterprise account, and I'll offer up my account for free if you want to push it through there.
Next question. Oh, go ahead, Roscoe, real quick.
I was just going to say, to do it legit is a long lead time. You almost need a person dedicated to just go after those licenses. And we have a person that does it, and it still takes us months and months to get the rights.
And again, they're not generally looking after schools using their content is not usually the target. And, so I wouldn't, especially if you're doing a private stream, you're not, again, with YouTube, what I would do is definitely do an unlisted stream as opposed to a public stream, and then embed that somewhere. So, that's the easiest way to do that is to go back to what was, if you can put something up on and literally open up a Squarespace account and embed a YouTube, video into it, you'd be done, and so you can have a registration in front of it. You can do all those little things and use a YouTube unlisted event. It'll still be seen by the YouTube eye, but it will not, it won't be going off all public, and it's just to the people who know about it. If someone shares the link, it will, but that's one way you could use YouTube. But if I was going to do that, if I was going to put it on somewhere and Guy was offering up a live stream account, I'd probably go there first. Because it's just going to truly be private to that audience. Next question.
James Fossling of Minneapolis says, professor is using an iPad with Sidecar on his M1 MacBook to annotate his slides in Zoom. All his connections are wired using 13-to-1 anchor dock, a USB cable to an iPad, campus Ethernet to gigabit port. Screen sharing is breaking and pulling USB cable replugging fixed. Pulling USB cable replugging fixed. Do you think bad lighting cable?
Bad lightning cable.
Oh, okay. Bad lightning cable.
Go ahead, Tony.
I just want to say that with lightning cables, you want to make sure that you're using Apple certified cables. It makes all of the difference in terms of doing anything with connecting iPhones or iPads.
And no
That's very
docks.
important.
No docks.
Yes. Don't use inexpensive or Amazon brand. You want Apple certified devices.
Yep. Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah. I guess it could be, I think trying and swapping the cable is probably the easiest thing. Depending on the school's Wi-Fi network, I would try using Sidecar on Wi-Fi in a test environment to just see, how that connection performs. That once you swap screen sharing on, that nothing sort of changes. I do know that, and since Sidecar's existed, when you do things like plugging in an additional display, and then when you turn on screen sharing, each of those steps, the operating system is sort of reconfiguring all of the displays that it knows about. And so, it is possible that even in a good setup, the configuration is changing, and that plugging the cable is what resets the order. So what you might find is that there is a particular order of plugging in computer, iPad, projector, turning on screen sharing that just keeps things the most stable. And that maybe the iPad is sort of the last bit of that. But unfortunately, I think the best way is probably to spend an hour in a lecture hall, if you can, and just try the various combinations of getting everything set up.
The other thing to remember is that Keynote can annotate from the iPad. So you can put the slides. The easiest way to do this is to have the slides in the iPad, and then figure out how to get that iPad output. So if you do a USB-C or Lightning to HDMI, and then you run it through either just a small digitizer that, there's a variety of relatively inexpensive HDMI to USB or HDMI to Lightning, or HDMI to Thunderbolt connections. There you go. But you have to get it HDMI out of the laptop, and then you have to figure out how you're going to get it into the computer if that's what you need to do. If the computer's going out HDMI, then you just have it directly. And at that point, you can annotate everything over. I don't have it right in front of me. I was looking around for my iPad, but you can now just draw on top of the slides inside of that, rather than trying to do, I think you're kind of in a roundabout solution at the moment. And it's a lot easier just to annotate on the slides themselves. It's actually one of the reasons, the primary reason I do almost all my presentations on my iPad is because of that. So the way I kind of create decks is I create the deck, I draw the deck on an iPad, just sketch it out, because you don't get caught up in which font and what pictures and everything else. You just draw what you want. So it allows me to have a train of thought if I just sketch every window out. Then I take it into a computer, because building an actual deck on an iPad is painful. So I put it into a Mac, and it's already there in the cloud, and I just open it up and I replace all those slides with the slides that I want it to look like. Then I open it up on the iPad when I go to present it, because I can draw on top of things. And so that's generally the way that my pattern for building those slides, and it works pretty well. Next question.
Moving on to a question from Sky in Seattle. And Sky asks, and I unfortunately have my thing covered here. Okay, I'm asking for a substitute teacher friend of mine that is stepping into a 3-week kindergarten class job, if she could borrow some Google Classroom documents to add to her teaching plan. Thank you.
Go ahead, Emily.
Sorry about that. I covered up my buttons. So I have a website that teachers in my districts have contributed to, and it's open and free to share. So I'll send you that in the chat. And then there's a woman on Twitter, Julia Dweck. I think she goes by at Julia Steam Dweck or something. I'll find it and link it. She has amazing Jamboards for kindergartners and first graders. So those are really interactive and fun to use in the Google Classroom. And there's a ton of them. So I'll make sure that you get those.
Oh, thank you. Again, you saved my marriage.
Next question.
Moving on to Steve Cotton of the San Francisco Bay Area. And he says, Stanford just released a study about Zoom fatigue. They seem to discount the effect of good audio and good video. Anybody read it, and any comments?
I'm on an argument with some academic somewhere in Indiana or something about this on Twitter right now. I have a very strong opinion about it, but I'll let Michael go first.
Yeah. So I mean, I read their sort of press release version yesterday, and then I was reading the paper a little bit today. It's pretty short if you go through it, but the lack of audio and video sort of quality was the first thing that I picked up on as well when I read through it initially, and so I would agree. I mean, in particular, audio and the strain that bad audio causes. And I mean, it's also, I think, interesting that the recommendations, when I read through them, the other thing I picked up on right away is they talked a lot about keyboard and screen placement. What it really sounds an awful lot to me is that we've shoved everyone into using computers for way longer than humans were designed for, and no one has given the world an ergonomics lesson.
Yeah.
Because all of the recommendation, well, not all of them, but all of the sort of general recommendations fall in the category of designing a much better ergonomic setup. And for anyone who has run into those issues, bad ergonomics are very fatiguing for your eyes, for your neck and shoulders and your wrists and everything else. And so, it seems to me like that there's a large part of it that way. But the other thing in terms of, methodology and practices, a lot of it's just, I think the biggest thing that when I realized is they only had about 400 people in their survey, which is a decent number, but I think for a survey, sort of Zoom fatigue, and the internet could have been quite a bit larger. But I do feel like the biggest thing is just that people seem to be tired from using a computer all day long, and I would feel like if we replace Zoom with one of another half a dozen tasks, people would probably feel almost as tired, and that AV is only a component.
Yeah, JJ.
I would invite folks to please go review that, and more importantly, go through the questions, because as I went through it this morning, and I've offered it to a number of groups this morning, the 300 plus, sorry, less than 10 million plus users that exist out there, that small scattering that was used for this study, which was less than 400 people. It's really important, I think, if you have any idea of how to do interviewing, that a lot of the questions seem to be in a certain direction. So it'd be really great to get some better or more data.
I'll have something out by Tuesday, because I'm going to talk about it on Mac Break, and I'm going to stop what I'm doing and write it over the weekend, and I'm going to attack it, like viciously. Like this is going to be, because my attacks have already been pretty rough on Twitter, which is basically that I just said it was wrong, and then someone responded and said, well, anecdotal experience doesn't supplant research, is what I got from some academic. And so my response there was, academics who don't have very much practical knowledge are asking, people who have no operational perspective, and then they create findings that are reported as truth by the press. This is why people don't listen to scientists in the press. Like, just understand, this is why this is a problem. If people say, why don't people listen to the press, or why don't people listen to science, is because they have made assumptions where they're, as to your point, JJ, they made assumptions that are based on the questions driving the direction of the answers, because these people are operational therapy people, right? So they're looking at, that's what that group does, right? So they think about it in their filter, in their little box. And the response that I had before that, was also like, what would I know? I've only done 2,000 events, prepped 6,000 people, and what's important is that when you ask each person what their experience is, they don't know the answer. They just answer. They're like a stimulus, like a lower brain stimulus telling you, I'm not comfortable with this. And you go, okay. And you make something up. When you see 1,000 people, you very quickly understand what's happening. So the thing is when you're working with them and then you fix it and then you see the result, you understand. It's like it's like searching the internet, Googling your symptoms and seeing a bunch of people with a bunch of opinions about what your symptoms are, as opposed to talking to a doctor who has actually treated those symptoms over and over and over and over and over again. And that's the fundamental problem is that there's no perspective. And then it's all over the national press, and they might as well be using smudge sticks, to solve this thing, with what they're doing, because it's all like this weird hocus pocus. They have no idea what they're talking about, because, so it is an amazingly, and I mean, it is stunningly inaccurate. And then it's on NPR and it's on Marketplace and it's on all these people are propagating it as the truth. And this is the problem with science and the press. I'm not saying that I love science and I'm in the press. So I'm not saying that it's all science and all press. It's not a generalization, but when scientists in the press don't understand why people don't believe them, it's because of this. It is they're making up stuff about things that they don't know anything about, and then they're propagating myths to the rest of the world. And then what happens is that then no one believes them about anything, because they've cried wolf. They've gone down some path that they didn't belong in. They've stepped out of their knowledge lane, and they've made up a bunch of stuff that isn't true. And then they, because all the stuff they're talking about is like useless. Like it is, and what they're not paying attention to, and I'll get off my sandbox in just a second, because all I've been thinking about since this thing came out is this thing, right? And so the other thing is that what they're not taking into account is how stressful it is to be with people in the real world, so that they have it like, so the thing is that when you fix your camera and your internet and your lighting and your audio, it is actually less stressful to deal with people, because I don't have to think about how I'm dressed below my waist. I don't have to travel. I don't have to worry about, I don't have to worry about whether I feel a little, heavy or anything else, because all of this stuff is all lined up, and I'm able to immediately talk to people all over the place, and it's comfortable. I don't have to figure out whether I can hear them. I don't have to, there's so many things that are better once you fix those base units. But it's, but again, it's written through a very, very small filter, and that's all. Good chat. And then Michael.
I do hope that when they push back against your tweet that you send them a link to office hours.
They can find it, because a lot of people are talking about it. So they can find, if they look at my string, they'll see enough of it, because what's next to it inside of my tweets are all how great the remotes were, and other things. And so I think that there's some stuff there if they actually do some research. Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, I think there is one piece that I don't know, enough of the psychology to say how valid it is, but there are a few other studies I've seen more generally that the way that humans process eye contact and the amount of people that are looking back at you, and for different people, seeing a grid of people that are smaller versus a larger view, certain people seem to find a grid easier because they don't feel like any one person is focusing on them, but some people find more eyes either more nerve-wracking or tiring, and so a single sort of individual speaker view. And the one thing that I do think is probably valuable, just especially for general meetings, is encouraging everyone to whatever platform they're using, explore the settings and turn things on or off on their own end. And so in Zoom is pretty darn good with the ability to, the one recommendation there that I know some faculty have really liked, and they've done it before this came out, but is hiding self-view if they find that tiring. Personally, I've learned to love having a monitor. I mean, I have an outside of Zoom monitor even, but that, and then using your own sort of tools to control what you like, whether that's speaker, gallery view, and Zoom does give you all of those things. So, there's, I think, a fair bit of personal preference there.
And there is, and there's personal preference for everything. I'll tell you what really fatigues me is conference rooms with speakerphones. But we don't see any. We don't see a lot of reports about that because they're all using them. But it is that is like, I literally think that it was created by the devil to slow the pace of human progress. Anyway, go ahead, Steve.
I just have a question for some of the other teachers.
Yeah.
Do they feel more Zoom fatigue? I mean, is at the end of a day, as opposed to when you were in front of a real class? Was there, less or more fatigue at the end of a day adding Zoom into it?
Go ahead, Emily.
When it comes to working with the kids, I think there's definitely a different style of fatigue. Like at the end of my day in front of live kids, my fatigue was, how am I going to get them more engaged? Where am I going to take them? What am I going to do? And it was more focused on what the students needed to learn. Whereas when I'm done with the Zoom screen, even though I've been doing this for a year now and I'm on screen anywhere from 3 to 8 hours a day, I'm tired of looking at my face. I'm tired of looking at a black wall of student names. I'm tired of, thinking, why is this kid not interacting with me? Is he there and has some other issue? Is it, and for me, it's my students aren't my kids. I model stuff and coach teachers. So I'm going into rooms where kids don't really know me. So I don't get to build the relationships as much, but like trying to be innovative and constantly thinking, okay, what else can we do to get them engaged? That's exhausting on top of staring at my face all day. Which I don't think any of us were meant to stare at our faces all day. Like all I do is see like things on my face where I'm like, is that really what I look like? And you constantly have to tell yourself to stop doing that,
Yeah.
So I think that's fatiguing.
Yeah, go ahead, Jesse.
Yeah, I host a lot of Zoom classes where we see 50% or more of the participants with their video off, and they're just using it as sort of the podcast kind of experience. And we also have this thing where, we go to so many Zoom sessions as meetings. So I think there's like this crossroads where Zoom feels sometimes like a meeting that has to be highly productive and all this stuff. So students may not have the space to be creative or problem solving or kind of doing something as an exercise. And Alex has talked about this a lot in office hours, like giving people an assignment, having them, come back with something. And I think a lot of teachers are starting to get some of those skills around interactivity and people doing things on Zoom rather than it being sort of a lecture hall. So I think that kind of stuff helps.
Well, and it's one of the reasons that we did webinar. We did experiment with meetings in the early, and we still do meetings every morning. so we have meetings. The meetings, the pre-show and the post-show are both meetings, and they're done that way because we actually get a different group of people that will turn on their cameras to be part of that. Literally, there's about a 50% of the folks that are in the pre-show, I think, don't end up in the main show. They just come for that area of time. And so one of the things that I have found that's useful is creating different pockets, for different people, and everyone operates differently. And again, I think that, and again, I as someone who I think was extremely uncomfortable with lots of people in the same room growing up, I think that I take offense to people saying that it's fatiguing, because to me it was really fatiguing. Like I have to come home from school and just lay down for a while, like just to like recover from being there. And so it's just, I'm always like, yeah, there's kids that this doesn't work for. My kids they're very outgoing, and so they want to be out there, but it's not everybody, and I think that we make up these studies to underline things that we think are the way it should be. Michael, and then Chris, and then Tlaloc.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's sort of the comment of just, if we're talking about 2020, everything in 2020 was fatiguing for 500 different reasons. And Zoom was one of them, but if we replace Zoom with anything else, it would have been just as fatiguing. And I think for me, teaching, there is a different lack of energy that when you're in person and in a room, whether you like it or not, and whether you thrive on it or not is, I think a personal thing. And it's not, any sort of one unidimensional factor saying, oh, I like the in-person energy or online energy more. But it is different, and learning how to deal with that different energy is, I think is a challenge. But the other thing that I'd say, in terms of my own teaching, and I try and be better about this, but the reality is it's hard to be, which is sitting teaching down versus standing up, which is how most of us who are teaching have spent our entire time, short or not practicing teaching, is standing up in front of a group of people, walking around. Removing that personal movement changes your own dynamic. And one of the things that is generally true is, in the way that when you exercise, you tend to get, that dopamine rush. Moving around gives you a different kind of dopamine and endorphins, and kind of creating your own personal energy. And so I think a lot of that is, something that, when you're hosting and when you're sort of, running the show, depending on what you're comfortable with, we all kind of have to learn. I will say having a standing desk when I remember, well, now I have a giant light, so I turned it into a sitting desk. But teaching standing up even with Zoom does feel very different than just sitting at a computer. And in some ways, sitting down, if I want a conversation sort of Socratic class, is a huge advantage that I didn't always have before too. So, you take some, get some, but it is, tiring, but it's for very different reasons.
Yeah. Chris, and then Tlaloc.
I agree with Michael's point about the energy of standing up and being able to move around. But I also wanted to add a subtle cause of my Zoom fatigue, which is the dread of dead air. Bill will remember this from his radio days, that it's kind of an article of faith that the worst thing that can happen is nothing, is silence. And I think both in sessions where I'm a participant rather than the runner of the show, even then I'm kind of anxious on behalf of the host that things keep moving and that there not be large gaps in the input or the sense of forward motion of the whole enterprise. So even when it's clicking, when it's working, there's still that anxiety on my shoulders about, is this going to fall apart, or is this going to grind to a halt prematurely, or is something going to come out of left field? Some hacker,
and I think it's
going to jump in and blow it up.
I think it's somehow it's making it okay too. Like some of our office hours, especially the post show 2 or 3 hours into it, sometimes when we leave it open, it is silent. People are working, and then someone will say something, and then they'll go back to what they were doing, and they kind of do it. And then the funniest one is also with my wife when she's doing meetings with meditation, and you just look over. When I was helping at the very beginning, I'd look over and see a whole screen of people that weren't making any noise and weren't moving, and I thought that I had lost my internet connection, and I was like, oh no, they're just meditating. So anyway, so it's a different. So I think it's just a matter of what the culture supports as well. Go ahead, Tlaloc, and then JJ, and then Trevor.
Alex, thanks for saying that about science versus media. And for me, that really opened up another thing about education in general, and that is that our projections on the people that we're trying to impart information on are super important. And we have to sort of think about where we come from and what the agenda we're trying to play onto somebody. And I don't think that the media is doing that, is curating themselves enough right now. So thank you for that. It's very interesting. I didn't see it that way until you said it.
I mean, in legal terms, we would call it chain of custody, and so where did that evidence go? Where did the raw evidence go until it got to the jury? And the issue is that it's very easy. It's why DNA doesn't really work. DNA doesn't work as a prosecution tool by itself, is because you have to maintain chain of custody. And so when you think of maintaining chain of custody as it relates to the truth, the truth is that it's getting handed from one person to the next. The interviewer is affecting the environment by the way that they ask the interview. The person is responding to it generally in a very naive way because they don't have any operational knowledge of how to do that. It's just like, and I don't mean to sound, this will sound condescending, but it's just like asking children about how to do something. They haven't done enough of it to understand what it is. So they're just kind of responding. And because of that, the questions have even more influence on their response because they don't have any, they haven't, and so then you hand it, then that researcher, and the problem that we have in our country, in the world, I think, is that people get a little piece of paper that says they're smart, and so it's a rubber stamp that just says you should listen to this person because they have this piece of paper, rather than we should really think about what that actually means and actually talk to people who actually do it. And this has been the problem since forever with news and academia I deal with this almost on a daily basis of someone who's in an academic background who hasn't actually done it, who has a whole bunch of ideas about how it should work in the real world. And this is with encoding mostly. I deal with academics that are dealing with how you build encodes. And these people are, this is the way that it should be done. We're like, yeah, we know that that's the way it should be done. It just doesn't actually work, And so the thing is that the map is never the territory. And when we look at that, that's the problem right now. And again, it's just a matter of, to your point, the press can't take that. This article, and what frustrates me about it is that the press has taken it on its face value and reported it to people who don't know any better either as the truth, right? And so now, and again, and so when practitioners who actually do this every single day, all day, say, that doesn't actually work, no one's going to listen to them because they're not academia and they're not the press. And so I feel like we have to defend, because there's a huge opportunity right now. I get that but there's a huge opportunity for where we're going with education and communication and everything else online. And when we get propagating a bunch of myths, about it, it really slows things down. Go ahead, Trevor.
JJ was first, but I'll throw it in real quick.
JJ. Well, go ahead, and then we'll go back to JJ.
First, I want to say I'm actually I avoid the news as much as possible outside the things that impact my daily life, and so I'm glad, because we do a lot of surveys and studies, and so we've had a little bit of training. I'm not good. I'm not a statistician anyway, but that survey looks horrible. I look through it, and the questions are biased. There's no control questions. Like, it's just a bad study. I actually am ashamed that I live in the same state as Stanford right now. Come on, try better. Because for us, and I can say it, so we see district down, and when it comes to those who respond to our survey, so again, you tend to get people that are polarized. The middle falls out when we send out surveys. We're still pretty close to split on people who like learning from home, and we even have some kids who the parents say that they're never coming back. They'll utilize our independent study moving forward, and so it's not quite as bad as I think media wants. And I also think this is loaded. The Zoom thing, I think, is an easy kind of scapegoat for COVID fatigue. And I hear a lot of times, because people say, I'm so tired of Zoom, but then they'll start, well, I'm tired of masks. I'm tired that we can't eat out. I can't. You're like, okay, well, you're not just Zoom. You're just tired of COVID, which is fair. But at some point, yeah, I think this is just sensationalized, and it's something that'll sell fast.
Yeah. And extroverts there's a lot of extroverts in the press who really need the stimulus and will latch on to anything that underlines what they believe. Go ahead, JJ.
Again, would it suggest that people go ahead and read the information that has been posted by Stanford and go through the quiz, and there's a confirmation. I saw a definite confirmation bias within both the quiz itself and the research. All the references that I saw, again, from my point of view, seem to be pointing in a particular direction. And I'm worried that that we're treating this as if though we're an experiment and not a reaction. That is to say, the COVID, it wasn't an experiment in moving the educational footprint forward. Saying, okay, well, the horse-drawn buggy was old and now we have cars. One of the frustrations I have seen, and I think that isn't addressed in this, is that the infrastructure hasn't been there. And that's another larger question to support doing this well, because the technology will keep on going forward. And if we haven't had the methods in place, whole word learning versus phonetic pronunciation that, again, was the big deal in California for a long time. And then we rolled back on that. And I, as a parent and as an educator at times, have seen those theories. And I think it's really important to try and not see this as an experiment using Zoom, but rather a way to interface with people in a more meaningful method using the technologies that exist today that can provide positive methods of connection, and not just in education, but for people in recovery situations, because Zoom has saved lives. That's not an exaggeration.
Well, and when cars came out, they were much less efficient than horses. They broke down all the time, and you need to fuel them up, and then you had to do all these things. And so, at the beginning, people made fun of people with the little horseless buggies because they didn't, they weren't nearly as useful as just the horse. They couldn't go off road. They couldn't do all these other things. They were very limited and everything else. But eventually, horses are now something we do for fun, and that's what's going to happen. And our day to day is going to become more and more virtual now, because that was what was always going to happen. Sky, and then Michael.
Well, I'm encouraged by this energy because it's positive movement. And again, coming from a news media background and promotions of marketing of politicians and things, I'm actually curious of how can we come alongside as a force that of public journalists and help educate that force of nature that they come from the world of, if it bleeds, it leads. That's how they get paid.
So my request will be I'm going to write an article that'll be out by Tuesday.
My
request will be that everyone goes to Medium and likes it, and goes on Twitter, and when I post the thing, retweets it. And if we do that, we can start pushing back on the thought process. I think we just need to. I'll be appropriate.
Well, even the article, phrase pushing back. How do we realign and readjust? So how do we take their energy and educate it? I know.
It's not.
I know.
It's not. They're not. Their cup is full. There's nothing else to put in it. So what there is to do is make sure that it doesn't damage everybody else. Like, you just can't. Michael, and then Aaron, and then Emily.
Okay, yeah. Aaron had her hand up. I was going to call that. But I guess.
Oh, I thought you did too. So sorry.
No, I did as well. I saw Aaron's hand up first, and I was.
I just call in the order that comes that I see it. It's nothing when people raise their hand. It's too many people for me to do that. All right,
what I was going to say though is, I do think that. I mean, it seems clear that the fatigue problem is very real. I think the thing that would be valuable is showing a wider group of people what the difference in being in a meeting that is well produced, the things that we do in office hours are like. And I don't know who the right group would be to do that research, but I don't think that it's hopeless to convince them that better audio and video are things that make meaningful differences. I think that a lot of people, academics included, which is perhaps people who are sort of not around this might be surprised to think that, or to realize that even at a place like Stanford, their Zoom meetings run into all the same crappy things that a normal Zoom meeting does. And I think a lot of it is I'm going to say there's probably a large fraction of people, total conjecture, who have been on Zoom meetings in 2020 and never been in a meeting where people have, every single participant is doing something to ensure that their video and audio quality are there.
Right.
And that there's just, a lot of people are probably even unaware. I mean, there's no reason perhaps they should have been aware, but that things like Ethernet versus Wi-Fi can make a huge difference in your meeting experience.
Right.
And so I do think some of this is just a broad amount of education that we could do.
Exactly, and that's why I'm gonna put out a series of articles, because I just feel like I need to I just need to take the time to do it. But I think that we have to show people too, and have them come see it and experience it. Shannon was just working with someone yesterday on an event, or 2 days ago maybe, on an event, and they were like, I'm on these events. These are publicly facing events. I'm on these events every week, and you're the first person that actually told me how to fix my image correctly. like suddenly it was like this opening, like, oh, like if I don't have my window behind me, I won't be in shadow. And if I got a little closer and if I plugged it in, like the suddenly it was like this. And that's the problem is that when the researcher doesn't know anything about AV, then they're not going to ask any questions that are related to AV. And the research should have said, the proper research should have been, I'm going to put a whole bunch of people into a new environment. Like, I'm going to send you gear. I'm not going to ask you polls. I'm going to send you a bunch of gear and then have you be in the same meeting over and over again. I'm going to teach you a bunch of techniques and then tell me if you are as fatigued as you were before, but there's this before and after that needs to happen, as opposed to just a bunch of opinions. Aaron, and then Emily.
So I might be in the minority here as a introverted extrovert, but I get slightly less fatigue being remote than I have been in the classroom, because walking around and really checking in, it's, running from one side of the room to the other and back and forth, and fire drills and running to the cafeteria. It's a lot more fatiguing. But I know so many of my kids enjoy being remote way more than being in the classroom. and we increase the energy all day, because I do know that it ebbs and flows depending on their moods. So doing things like brain breaks and yoga and just taking a break, like we're going to take a 15-minute break, go have a snack, go play in the snow, go do something else. Lately, I've also been socializing recess, having them come back and having a specific topic like Minecraft or dolls or online games, and they can go into a breakout room and chat where I monitor so I can listen to 2 conversations at once. And then gamifying it, really anything that I do for content is really a energy booster. So I kind of do at least 2 or if not 3 games during the day throughout all the content just to keep them energized and motivated. But we're still doing
That's great.
pretty well here.
That's exactly. I mean, and Emily, real quick, and we're going to move on because we're running out of time again.
Actually, I was going to pass because the got said.
All right, next question.
Moving on, Marcus, and it looks like Raitalahi, and I apologize if I got that wrong, from Skov, Sweden, says, what would a Zoom room in the future look like for a teacher if you could design it?
Go ahead, Guy.
If I could design it, it's going to get a little crazy. Are you ready? It's going to be a bunch of stuff here. Let me.
We'll have to go really fast. We might have to have
Okay.
a second event. Yeah, go ahead.
All right. So basically a touch screen with a key background and to draw or grab things like, the Minority Report where I'm grabbing stuff and just moving the touch screen, but then it becomes screen. And here you can, draw on the large TV, but then it's just a big, huge chroma key. And you got a VJ that would be able to operate, behind and mute and unmute. And then you can toss it to, another teacher that's on the other side. So this was all done live, and we basically were just tossing it back and forth. So I think that's the future where you're able to just grab stuff, toss things back and forth, and have a VJ.
Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, I think for me, if we're talking physical rooms, for those who have seen the term, active learning classrooms are very different than traditional style lecture halls or even just K-12 classrooms. And you typically have things, table groups, additional perhaps screens or computers. To me, I think the thing that would be fantastic is just an active learning style classroom that is flexible, but has all of the cameras and audio equipped at each group to really record and capture that presentation. And what I really want is, and this is what Zoom is not good at today and is tough with in-person rooms, is I want the ability to record something and provide, a good feed, but to also control how much of the student voice and interaction is captured in that. With Zoom right now, you don't have, a choice. It's sort of, unless you really edit, it's a little bit of all or nothing. In a real classroom today, people who ask questions are just rarely ever captured. And so you have, that poor experience. I want a classroom that gives you control over, when people are participating, whether that is sort of in the feed or not, and then just let you record everything.
I mean, I think for me, I don't like the thing behind me. So I think that I get rid of the blackboard pretty quickly and put it right in front of me on a Wacom tablet. I mean, that's what I've showed earlier. And so with that, I can now just seamlessly bring in lots of content, draw on top of that content, talk to people about it. And I kind of, whether I'm standing or sitting, I want a growing number of monitors and other things that I can see what's going on. I can see the students, I can, react to them, but I'm able to get to my content and respond to their questions fluidly. If I want to jump to an app, I want to jump to another camera, I want to jump to a whiteboard, I want to jump to all those things. I'm not moving around to do it. And I'm not looking like drawing out like this for me behind me is just ergonomically not as awesome. But if someone reminds us, let's put a second hour in and just do a whole hour on that. Next question.
Mark Hadley of Seattle says, during this pandemic, we've seen, have we seen any more team teaching going on in public schools, perhaps on an ad hoc basis, 2 classes combined?
We have to go pretty fast. Go ahead, Emily, and then Trevor.
Yeah, my Spanish teachers that teach the college level Spanish courses in the classroom have teamed up, and they have between them something like 200 plus kids, but they're able to cover different topics more efficiently. And then if a kid is looking for, or a group of kids are looking for a specific help, they kind of tag team like the office hours that they do. And that seems to be working out really, really well. And I'd like to see it more, but they seem to be the only teachers who have latched onto it.
Yeah. Go ahead, Trevor.
We've seen it more than we've ever done because digitally you can move fast. So you can be in the classroom already, take over. It's still the same type of teachers that are doing it, but I think it makes it a lot easier and a lot more accessible for teachers.
And I think you'll see a lot more of that. And, again, either schools will adopt it, or if you look at all these people that want their kids, or the kids now want to be at home instead of going there, you end up with a very large pressure or a very large opportunity to serve them with, areas where you have 5 or 6 teachers that are teaching 500 students or 250 students. And I think it's actually a better experience a lot of times if you build up tools that let you go off and help individual students and have that extra staff to do that. Next question.
Craig Hibbert asks, is there a way to keep Keynote from taking over both screens during a presentation? I want my second screen available for other programs while I'm presenting the Keynote.
Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, I forget the option offhand, and I probably can't pull up quite fast enough, but it is in the system or the Keynote preferences. And there's an option for screens, and you can turn off your second screen or whatnot. And also in macOS, you get to play around with which is your primary and secondary screen in the system settings, and that can give you additional control over which exact screen your slides versus whatever else will show up on.
And what you want to look at also is play slideshow. It's under play slideshow in window, which ironically doesn't have a keystroke for it. But anyway, that play show, that helps a lot to do that. Next question.
Our last tagged EDU question is coming from Andrew Flowerdew in Warwick. How will developments in audio and display technologies impact the classroom of the future, say for 2030? AI, LED improvements, computational sound, note intentionally open, but thinking about space size and general education environments as a whole, while merging of the classroom and online space, plus the opportunity for ubiquitous high-speed connectivity.
So it's a great question. Let's have the second hour of education next week, so 9 to 10, be dedicated to that question, like the classroom of the future. I think we just do a brainstorm, let everybody know now. We'll put it in there. So we'll have a whole general Q&A, but we'll talk about classroom of the future as kind of just a brainstorming session. So think about it for our teachers here and our administrators and everything else that are in the classroom. Think about it this week and come with ideas. And we'll just make that a whole hour. So we'll do general Q&A from 8 to 9, and then we'll do and we might start building second hours just for education on Saturdays if you have things that you guys want to talk about. We are going to do the remotes the remotes are going to do a longer form next Saturday, I believe. Is it next Saturday? Did you guys decide? I didn't see the memo.
I think so, but there's some question about how many modules and how many days.
The time is right though. So it's 10 a.m. 10 a.m. Next week, we're going to do like a 3 or 4 hour remote to break down because there was so much information. The 1 hour wasn't enough and it was so great. So anyway, so we're going to break that up. But we'll have we'll have 2 hours for education from now on. I'm not going to schedule things back into it because it's not enough time. So I apologize for shortening these. It was a oversight on my part. Definitely think about that, and we'll in our first second hour. And if teachers have ideas, or if educators have ideas about things you'd like to make second hours for education, feel free to just direct message me in Discord, and maybe we'll figure out somewhere we can put that. But we'll have one that's kind of dedicated to that, and we'll start. If you guys are open to it, we'll play around with doing just second hours dedicated to brainstorming certain things or even workshopping things if we want to kind of work through those specifically. All right. Well, thank you all. It's like my favorite hour of the week. It's so good to see all of you. I'm so glad that you guys keep showing up and having this conversation. I think that we're figuring stuff out, together, and it's a really fun conversation. So anyway, I'm going to now jump. I'm going to end this meeting, and we're going to jump to the Zoom OSC meeting. And remember, if you're coming back for Black Magic, it won't be this meeting. It'll be a new meeting. There's a registration in the email that went out. I apologize for the confusion. Dealing with how Zoom works inside of what we're trying to do didn't quite work out. But we're going to probably just keep this meeting running all the way through in the next coming weeks, as opposed to this Zoom OSC. The reason we built a separate one for Zoom OSC was because of how it joined and being able to show examples. So that was kind of threw a wrench into the system. So anyway, so we're gonna jump out and jump into that. All right. See you, everybody. See you next week.
And all the links are in Alex's emails that you would have gotten just